The scent of pine and old money hung heavy in the lodge's great room. I stood by the massive stone fireplace, my worn backpack feeling like an alien presence against the polished log walls. Around me, my relatives sipped expensive whiskey and discussed stock portfolios, their voices a low, confident hum that had surrounded me my entire life. Before we begin this family meeting, my Uncle Robert's voice boomed, cutting through the chatter. He stood near the moose head mounted above the mantel, a position he always took when making important announcements. I'd like to know who's listening to our family stories. Where are you all from? Drop your city in the comments below. And after hearing this, tell us honestly, what would you have done in my niece's position? We read every comment. Now let's begin. He smiled, a practiced, political expression that didn't reach his eyes. As you all know, the annual decision about the future of Cedar Lake is upon us. The developer's offer is substantial, and after careful consideration, I'm against it. The words were quiet, but they cut through the room like glass. Every head turned toward me. My cousin, Bradley, choked on his drink. My Aunt Patricia's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched in surprise. My uncle's smile tightened. Maya, sweetheart, we appreciate your passion, but this is a business decision. This isn't just business, I said, my voice gaining strength. This is our family's legacy. This lake is where Grandpa taught us all to fish. It's where Your mother isn't here anymore, Uncle Robert said, his tone shifting from patronizing to sharp. And frankly, neither are you. You show up once a year with your idealistic notions, but you don't contribute. You don't understand the financial pressures. Bradley stepped forward, smirking. Come on, Maya. You live in a studio apartment over a bakery. You think your art projects can pay the property taxes on 1,000 acres? Be realistic. The familiar heat of humiliation crept up my neck. This was our dance. Every family gathering, they reminded me of my place, the dreamer, the poor relation, the one who didn't understand how the real world worked. I have a proposal, I said, pulling a rolled-up document from my backpack. An alternative to the developers. A conservation trust that would. My uncle plucked the papers from my hand, glanced at them, and dropped them on the side table with a dismissive flick. A non-profit? Charitable fantasies. The family doesn't run on good intentions, Maya. It runs on capital. The lake is pristine wilderness, I protested, my hands beginning to shake. The development would destroy the ecosystem, pollute the water. Enough. Robert's voice was final. The vote is called. All in favor of accepting the Clearwater Development Group's offer? Hands shot up around the room. My aunts, uncles, cousins, all raised their hands without hesitation. Bradley's smile was triumphant. Opposed? My hand was the only one in the air. I stood alone in the middle of the room. The crazy environmentalist. The family disappointment. The motion carries, Robert declared. We'll notify the developers tomorrow. The paperwork should be. There won't be any paperwork. A new voice, calm and weathered, came from the doorway. Old Mr. Henderson, my grandfather's lifelong lawyer and friend, stood there leaning on his cane. He'd been a fixture at these meetings for decades, but usually sat silent in the corner. Arthur? My uncle looked annoyed. This is a family matter. Precisely, Mr. Henderson said, moving slowly into the room. He carried a battered leather briefcase that looked as old as he was. And it seems the family has forgotten the most important document of all. He placed the briefcase on the large oak table in the center of the room and clicked it open. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. My father's will was settled years ago, Robert said impatiently. We all know the terms. Equal shares to his children, with me as the executor. Ah, but there was a codicil, Mr. Henderson said, pulling out a single, yellowed piece of paper. A final addition your father made 2 weeks before he passed, witnessed by myself and the head nurse at the hospital. He adjusted his glasses and began to read, his voice clear and strong. To my granddaughter, Maya Elise Carter, I leave sole and complete ownership of Cedar Lake and all surrounding lands within the original property lines, approximately 987 acres. The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pine needle drop outside. Bradley was the first to break it with a strangled laugh. That's impossible. That can't be legal. The property was divided equally. Mr. Henderson looked up, his eyes sharp. The lake itself was always held separately, Bradley. Your grandfather bought out his siblings' shares decades ago. He just never bothered to tell any of you. He knew what you'd do with it. He slid the document across the table toward me. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely pick it up. There it was, in my grandfather's familiar, looping handwriting. The signature, the notary stamp. It was real. This is outrageous. My uncle spluttered, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. She can't. She's a child. She has no head for business. This will be a disaster. I looked down at the document in my hands, then at the faces of my family. Faces filled with shock, anger, and undisguised greed. The weight of what I held settled over me, heavy and terrifying. Right. I'm 28, Uncle Robert, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And it seems I have quite a head for business now. I turned to Mr. Henderson. As the owner, I have the authority to reject any development proposals, correct? Absolutely, Maya, he said, a faint smile touching his lips. The lake is yours, entirely. The room erupted. You'll ruin us, Aunt Patricia cried. The tax burden alone. You can't manage this, Bradley shouted. You'll be bankrupt in a year. You selfish girl, another cousin yelled. After everything this family has done for you. I let the waves of their anger crash against me, but for the first time, they didn't knock me down. I stood firm, the deed to the lake feeling like a shield in my hands. What would Grandpa say? I asked quietly, and the room stilled. He loved this place more than any of you. He taught me to read the water, to listen to the woods. He didn't leave this to me because he thought I was the best business person. He left it to me because he knew I was the only one who loved it as much as he did. I looked at my uncle, whose face was a mask of fury and defeat. The development is off the table, permanently. I walked out of the lodge then, the deed clutched in my hand. The cool mountain air felt like freedom. Behind me, I could still hear the raised voices, the arguments, the sound of a dynasty realizing its weakest link had just become its cornerstone. The first month was the hardest. The property taxes were staggering, just as my aunt had warned. My family, predictably, refused any help. You wanted the lake, you deal with the consequences, my uncle had said during our one terse phone call. I sold my car. I took on more freelance graphic design work, working late into the night in my tiny apartment. I ate more rice and beans than I cared to remember. But every weekend, I drove up to the lake and walked the shore, reminding myself what I was fighting for. It was on one of those walks that I found the old boathouse ledger. Tucked away in a dusty drawer was my grandfather's meticulous handwriting, detailing not just the maintenance of the property but his ideas. Potential for ecotourism, one note said. Clean, quiet, sustainable. A seed of an idea began to grow. Using the last of my savings, I hired a conservation biologist and a small marketing consultant. We created a business plan for Cedar Lake Eco Retreat, limited, high-end camping, guided nature tours, photography workshops. It would preserve the land while generating enough income to sustain it. My family laughed when they heard. Glamping, Bradley had sneered. You're gonna save 1,000 acres with s'mores and birdwatching? But I pressed on. I launched a crowdfunding campaign, focusing on the conservation angle. To my stunned surprise, it went viral. People were hungry for stories of preserved wilderness, for a stand against unchecked development. The funding goal was met in 3 days. The morning we broke ground on the first carefully planned cluster of eco-cabins, the black SUVs returned. My uncle Bradley and their lawyers emerged, their expressions grim. We're here to make you a final offer, Robert said, not bothering with greetings. A real one, not the pathetic little glamping project you're trying to scrape together. He named a figure that made my knees weak. It was more money than I could ever dream of. Enough to never work again, to travel the world, to live in comfort for the rest of my life. I looked past him, at the lake. The morning mist was rising off the water, and a loon called, its cry echoing across the stillness. I saw my grandfather in his old fishing boat, teaching me how to cast. I saw my mother, laughing as she swam in the cool water. This lake isn't for sale, I said. Don't be a fool, Maya. Bradley snapped. This is your one chance. Your little hippie camp will fail, and you'll lose everything. Just then, a new car pulled up. A simple, clean sedan. A woman in a sharp, professional jacket got out. Maya Carter? She asked, extending her hand. Sarah Jenkins, National Geographic Travel. We'd like to feature Cedar Lake Eco Retreat in our Places of a Lifetime series. My uncle and cousins stared, their mouths slightly agape. National Geographic. The stamp of legitimacy I could never have bought. As Sarah and I began discussing the feature, my family slowly got back into their cars and left. They didn't say goodbye. They knew the battle was over. That was 2 years ago. Today, Cedar Lake Eco Retreat is fully booked a year in advance. It was featured not just in National Geographic, but in 6 major publications. It's won awards for sustainable tourism and has become a model for conservation-based business. I live in the lodge now, the one where they all voted to sell my inheritance. I restored it, filling it with light and my own art. This morning, I received a letter. It was from my cousin Bradley. The envelope was thick, expensive. Inside was a polite, formally worded request. He was wondering if the family could hold their annual reunion at the lake this year, as they had in the old days. I read it twice, then walked out onto the deck overlooking the water. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The lake was perfectly still, a mirror of the heavens. I thought about my grandfather, about the trust he had placed in me. He hadn't just given me land. He had given me a purpose. He had seen the strength in me that everyone else, including myself, had missed. I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. I hadn't decided yet whether to reply. Some things you need to sit with, to weigh against the quiet of the morning and the call of the loons. The girl they thought wasn't practical enough, wasn't business savvy enough, now held the deed to their memories, to their legacy. And I had learned that the best revenge wasn't shutting them out forever. It was building something so beautiful, so successful, that they had to come back and ask to see it.